Some more audio restoration to do. This is a very nice looking Pioneer SX-850. I'm just going to be doing a general cleanup and recap job on this, and maybe a couple other minor things. It is in working condition. As far as I know, it hasn't had anything replaced in it except for the light bulbs, but I won't really know until I start digging into it. Do a quick test here. Make a separate video segment in case I have to take the music out. I can definitely say that the treble is quite bright on this, even with the original caps. It's not bad sounding though. But anyway, let's get to the good stuff and have a look inside. Here's what it looks like on the top side. You can see somebody put some LED replacements in here, and I'm guessing these are 12 volt DC LEDs, and they're being run on the original 8 volt AC circuit that runs these lights, and somebody put 2 orange ones and 2 white ones in here, and it does not even light the dial up in the slightest. It's just not doing anything. So I'm going to have to take care of that. I've got some much better lights to put in there that are LED, and I'll modify the circuit to run those properly. All that there is on the top side is the transformer, filter caps, power amp, and the tuner. And that relay right there is for the speakers. This layout really reminds me of a Marantz receiver, especially the power amp section. It looks so similar to like a Marantz 1060 or something, only a little bit bigger. I think this is rated at 65 watts per channel RMS into 8 ohms. And I don't remember exactly what year it was made, but it was mid to late 1970s. Most of the stuff I need to access is on the bottom, so I gotta get that panel off next. I'm working on taking all the knobs off because I want to remove the faceplate at the same time that I remove the bottom panel, just to keep it out of harm's way. And I've noticed that a lot of the knobs, the plastic inside part is coming out of the aluminum outer housing, so these are going to have to be glued back together. The tuning knob is held on by a 1/16 inch Allen screw, set screw, and just got to loosen that up. I think there's only one in there. That is a nice chunk of aluminum right there. So I think I just got to take a couple screws out and this thing's going to come off. Looking at the bottom panel, I can tell that it's been opened before because there's little scratch marks around the screw head where it was in a different position, and where the screwdriver actually goes in, you can just see the slightest amount of wear. So I know that somebody's been inside this at one point in time. Here's a look underneath. Everything looks pretty good in here. I can see that this fuse right here is slightly newer. It's probably been changed at some point in time. It's one of those 1 amp fuses. But this layout is a lot different from the SX-780 and 880 that I've worked on before. Those were late 70s, early 80s construction, where this is mid 70s, and it really shows they didn't skimp on anything with these. And again, it kind of reminds me of Marantz in a way with the type of layout they used, and it's just generally built a lot heavier than the 80 series receivers were. I can see why some people prefer the 50 series as they call these, you know, the 750, 850, 950. They are very well built. Everything seems to be original in here with the exception of that fuse, and it looks very good. So this will be a fun restoration job. It's going to be a lot of work though. In fact, I think I'm going to be replacing close to 100 components, mostly caps, and I've already got most, if not all, the parts ordered in. Tons and tons of parts, and I had made a list going through the service manual before I even got this receiver and wrote down every single cap and some other components that might be needed, and just the process of picking out which caps to use and getting everything in my shopping cart at Mauser Electronics took me an hour or two. I mean, it's a very involved process to restore something with this many components in it. So one of the things I like about Pioneer receivers like this is how straightforward it is to remove the faceplate. There was just 3 of the controls that have a nut on them that holds the bottom half of the faceplate, and on the top there's just 1 screw in each corner, and it comes right off. Even the little push buttons are held in by clips so they don't go flying out, you know, unless you push them out. But I'd still secure those if you're going to move the faceplate around a lot. You don't want to lose these nice little aluminum buttons. And I think this faceplate actually has glass in it, unlike the plastic of the newer, cheaper models. Very sweet. So far I've got the phono EQ and the protection board done. I'm going to start on the power supply next. This is going to be kind of a chore because I don't think there's enough slack in the wires to tilt the board back, and I'm going to have to remove all of these wires and label where they go. Each post is numbered, and that'll allow me to tip this board down so that the back of it's facing me. And there's quite a few parts to replace on this. Several caps and at least 1 transistor. The other problem I'm having is these old plastic standoffs that hold the boards in are extremely brittle, and a lot of them are breaking on contact when I try to release them, so I'm going to have to get some new standoffs for this before I can put it the rest of the way back together. I've got the power supply detached from the standoffs, and I may be able to rebuild it without removing too many wires. I'll find out. But I'm looking at these 2 transistors right here, which are 2SC-1061, and they appear to be factory. There's no evidence that they've ever been changed. In fact, the solder is cracked on those. That'll definitely cause intermittent operation. But looking over here at the service manual, they are listed as 2SD313, and those are known to fail too, and I was expecting to have to change those. There is one more that's still installed, which is this one right here. I'll probably change that for preventative measure. But they must have changed those transistors at some point during production over to the 2SC-1061. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So, let's see how far I can get on this without the wires getting in my way. I'm just about done with the power supply. Unfortunately, I've had another setback like what usually happens. Changing this transistor right here, the mica insulator broke when I took it off, and of course nothing I have around here has anything like that in it. I must have torn apart 10 or 15 pieces of scrap equipment around here and never found a single one. Blows my mind. And now I gotta wait another week, all because of one stupid insulator. I was really hoping to put this back in and turn this back on and test it yet tonight, but so much for that. Now that this has been sitting here for about a week, it's Friday night again. I've got more time to work on it now. I had some more parts come in. I've decided to replace all 3 of the 2SD313 transistors on this power supply board, with the hardest working one down here being replaced with a KSD526Y, which is slightly higher ratings than the original, to give it a bit more headroom. Originally it was running really close to its rating. And the other 2 over here I'm going to be replacing with KSD880. So I just got to get these mounted on the heat sinks, and but first I'm going to check them on my transistor analyzer just to see what I get with one of those 2SC-1061. Current gain of 94. No leakage. That transistor's still good, but I'm replacing these because they often suffer from heat fatigue, which I have seen before, especially in Pioneer receivers. I think it was a SX-850 that I was working on where a transistor like that was thermally sensitive, and I actually showed it being heated up with the soldering iron and going open when it got hot. So, preventative maintenance by replacing these ahead of time. Finally, some real progress. Power supply is all back together. I'm going to do a brief test, make sure everything's good before I remount the board. I've also got to replace all those craptastic standoffs that all shattered when I tried to release them, even being gentle. But I've got a bag of brand new ones right here. Sounds like a champ. I did find 2 or 3 bad capacitors on the power supply board, especially these. Let's see if I can get a view here. These 2 small ones right in the center were totally open, and there were some other ones that were out of tolerance, but I was amazed at how many broken solder joints there were on that. I don't know how this thing even worked. Looking in the service manual here at the disassembly instructions, I am getting ready to remove the power amp module. And supposedly you can flip it over and lay the heatsink kind of over where the tuner is and be able to access the back of the board that way without disconnecting all the wires. So it'll be interesting if that actually works out. However, I think, see, the service manual assumes there's a metal cover over the tuner protecting it, and in this receiver that cover is missing. I don't know whether it was taken out at the factory or if it's just plain missing because somebody else took it out later down the road, but I'll have to find a way to protect the tuner from the heatsink and stuff laying on top of it. But hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward getting to these other boards. It's always harder than it looks because of all the different layers, but gotta start somewhere. Well, I've got the amp module out. It's quite difficult to work with though. There's not a lot of room behind it, and I can't see what I'm working on the other side without continuously moving this thing back and forth, back and forth. I've also removed the temperature sensing diodes. They break very easily, and I didn't want to bend them around any more than they already were. So just to be safe, I took them off the heatsink. But in order to save having to move this a million times back and forth, I've printed the foil pattern from the service manual so I can see exactly where the caps are. There's only 8 that need to be changed, and I can tell right where I need to put the desoldering gun to remove them, such as this one right down here, if I can even reach it with like this. There's one. Let's see, we got one right here. Watch me melt my camera lens. That'd be cool. There's 2. That's a lot easier to do this with 2 hands. It's nice to have that amp back in there. I think the worst thing that's going to be left is probably going to be the tuner, because I have to undo all the string and all that fun stuff. I don't think the switchboards are going to be that bad. So far everything's going pretty well. I think I'm going to get rid of these crappy dial lamps next because they're bugging me. Oh, it's getting late. I'm getting tired. Very tired. I decided to start on the tuner next, since I had all the caps on hand that I need. I got to remove about 5 wires that are attached at this end of the board and remove the pulley, and that'll allow me to flip the board up this way, because I think everything else is attached at this end. And to keep everything in place, I'm going to turn the dial all the way to this end, and at that point the capacitor is fully closed and stops turning, and that'll give me an easy reference point to put it back in. Everything needs to stay in alignment. I've just finished working on the tuner board. I've replaced all the electrolytic capacitors and the tantalum capacitors that were on there. Found several broken solder joints on the tuning capacitor. The ones that actually hold it on the board were cracked all the way through, so that should make the tuner work a little more consistently. So I'm ready to put this back in, and I think the work on the top side of the chassis is pretty much done except for the dial lights. Alright, tuner's reinstalled and working good, and I've also finished the dial lamps. Trying to get a shot of what it looks like, but it's hard because there's still some other light sources in the room that are making it look funny. But it's lighting up about like it would with the factory bulbs. These, plug my lights back in here. These are multi-chip LED lamps. This is what they look like. And the LEDs along the outer edge of those line right up with this fiber optic diffuser, so it works great for this. I built a simple rectifier circuit on that terminal strip there. It's mounted with the original factory screw with a plastic washer to protect the circuit board, since there are traces there. And there's a small bridge rectifier and a 1000 microfarad filter cap. To get the power, I just took the original AC wires off these 2 terminals here, pulled them down, and then brought them back up through that hole right there, and ran them to the terminal strip. And it gets rectified and comes out here. It's about 11 volts DC. And also, while soldering something like this, I have to put, a piece of cardboard down in here to protect this dial cord in case the solder drips. It's always a good idea to be safe with that. Nobody likes to restring dial cords, especially for stupid reasons. Alright, it's Friday night again. It's been a couple weeks since I worked on this, but just got home from work a little while ago. I've been messing with jukeboxes all day. Now it's time to tackle this receiver again. Had myself some coffee and I'm ready to go. Doing some more preventative maintenance on the power supply. I've replaced that other big transistor with a KSB 596, and the other one was in kind of rough shape. Let's see, what was this? A 2SB 507, and so that's taken care of. Also replaced both of the Zener diodes, the 13 volt and 14 volt half watt. And power supply voltages are right on the money, so we're looking good there now. Looking at these boards from the front of the receiver, the flat amp, tone amp, and switchboard, a couple things I wasn't expecting. First off was the tantalum capacitors that are all over these boards. The service manual I'm using doesn't have a parts list for these boards, so I had no idea that these were tantalum. I cannot stand tantalum capacitors, especially in the signal path. But I'm not sure whether I want to change these out or not, because I probably don't have replacements for them, and I don't know if I want to wait another week or two to finish the repairs on this. The other thing is these are extremely difficult to remove, especially this switchboard. There's one capacitor down there. It's very difficult to access. I may end up having to unsolder this whole switch assembly to take it out in order to get access to the back and get some deoxide into these, because they're sealed assemblies. And there is a million wires attached to this assembly, so I think the easiest way to get these cleaned is to probably unsolder the whole thing and leave the wires attached to the board, because these are the most troublesome switches in this receiver. They're causing bad connections and stuff because it's the input selectors, and more than one of them are pretty intermittent when it comes to the connection quality. so I got to do something about that. But I'm a little bit concerned that these solder tabs that are kinked over to hold the switches in place before soldering, I'm afraid they're going to break off when I go to straighten them out. So I'm not really sure what to do. I can't really get any deoxit in through the front of these switches, at least not very effectively. Same goes for these switches here. They're pretty much all sealed except for the sides, and I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to get access to these. The potentiometers won't be too bad. I just wish there was more access from the top, because it's very difficult to get down in these corners and stuff to get the cleaner in there. And another thing is, with these boards, running into caps like these, there's some that have these orange labels, and almost all the caps on these boards are low leakage type, so you need to replace those with something like Nichicon KL series, because if you don't use low leakage caps, you will increase the noise floor of the receiver. So it's just been a pain. The other boards weren't so bad, but these front ones are quite a chore, and I'm mainly not sure what to do about the switches. Well, I realized now that I've had a decent night's sleep and took a better look at these switches, all I got to do is take the clips off the top here, and this top piece just lifts off the switch, and I have complete access to the contacts. I should be able to get some deoxit in there no problem now. Here's what's inside the switches. If you take the plastic actuator out, you can see the 4 contacts just sitting loose in there, and they're held in place by the 4 little rectangular recesses on this plastic actuator here. It's pretty darn fragile, and I probably won't take the rest of them that far apart, but it's an interesting design. Well, I got that one back together after the contacts fell all over the place. In fact, a couple of them were not in quite the right shape, so of course I had to very carefully bend them back, and amazingly it seems to be okay. Here's an example. I just finished cleaning this one by just taking the top lid off and getting some deoxit in there while holding the actuator in place to make sure it doesn't fall out. Here's one I have not cleaned. That is for phono number 1. You can see how much noise is in that switch. This one here has been cleaned, and this is the one I just put together for the auxiliary. And again, this one's not cleaned. Neither are these two. One for the FM or AM cuts out pretty bad too. So let me clean the rest of these and see how they turn out. The owner of this receiver had complained about problems with the phono inputs, and I've caught it doing what I'm pretty sure they were talking about. And it sounds to me like leaky transistors on the phono preamp board, and I'll show you what that sounds like. Right now it's on AM. And it's FM with no signal coming into the tuner. I've got no antenna hooked up. But here is the phono inputs. Hear the random crackly noise on the left channel. That is almost certainly a leaky transistor on the phono preamp. So I'll be looking at that next. Troubleshooting the phono equalizer board, I found that at the input of C11 I have a negative voltage and some noise, and on the other channel it's normal. I have nothing at the output side of C12 on that channel. And I've already changed Q1, which was the 2SA725. I was suspecting that Q5 might be shorted or leaky, so I'm going to take that out and test it next. Well, I got that working. It was one of those transistors, I'm not sure which one. I changed both of them, and ironically they tested okay on my transistor analyzer. Didn't have any leakage current. Maybe they were just at the point where they only started to leak at a higher voltage than what the tester supplies, because it's nice and quiet now, and I have both channels. So moving on to the next board. I think I finally caught the stupid problem that was making both channels make a pop sound out the speakers and tripped the protection relay for a second. It took a long time for me to finally catch it, but I believe it's Q5, which drives the 36 volt output, and I've connected it to the scope and was watching it, and especially on power up it would jump a little bit. It would come up to voltage and I would see it drop for just a fraction of a second, and if it didn't drop very much it would make a click in the speakers, and if it really dropped it would actually trip the relay. I got a new transistor in there using a much heavier KSC 2690 AYS. Should really help the reliability. But I'm getting tired of taking this power supply in and out of here, and if it wasn't for staring at the scope at just the right time I wouldn't have caught the problem, but it was dropping out way too quick for my meter to catch, but the scope had no problem, of course. Hopefully that's the last of that. I'm just going to let this run for a while. I think it's time for a lunch break though, I'm starving. I've just completed one of the more difficult steps on finishing this up. I had to take the power amp assembly back out and replace some potentially faulty transistors before any trouble happened. There are 4 of them on here. I can't really get a good shot, but they're down here, just the really small ones, the 2 SB726, 2 on each channel, and I replaced those with KSA 992 FBU. Got to watch out because the pinout is reversed on those. And the labeling, the board is labeled for the positioning, but it's a little bit hard to read because it's just a transistor schematic symbol. It doesn't actually say E, B, and C like Marantz does, for example. I've also replaced the potentiometers with multi-turn type, and they come from the factory set about mid-position, which should be okay for this starting off. And the service manual wants a 5.6K resistor across the power amp input terminals when setting the bias and DC offset. So I've got some precision resistors on there. I used an old composite video cable just to get the RCA jacks, soldered the resistors on there, and I've got to have the receiver on its side to access the terminals on the bottom for doing this, so it's going to be kind of difficult. Take a look at the manual here, and it tells exactly what to do. And that's one of the most important things about working on one of these receivers, is having all of the service literature so you know exactly how to set everything up. Fixing the circuit can sometimes be done without a manual, but as far as the adjustments, you almost always have to have the service manual for that. I'm just about finished up with the bias and offset. I've just done the bias on the right channel. And 2 things I really like to use are these type of clip-on leads with the very, very small tips. You don't want to risk shorting out between posts on this. Also, good idea on other receivers like Marantz, where they have posts on the boards. And I really love the new multi-turn potentiometers. It's much easier to work with those. Now I just got to give this about 10 minutes to warm up and tweak the adjustment, and that output module is ready to go. I figured I'd just let this thing run for a couple hours and take myself a little break. So far it's been working perfect now. No more weird quirks. Still feel like I'm only about halfway done, but I think all the major stuff is out of the way. I can't wait to put this back together. I've got the preamp boards back in now. all new caps and cleaned all the controls that were giving me problems. And discovered another issue while I was tucking the power supply wires back into their holders while I had this playing at a low volume. When I moved these by accident while putting these back, it caused one channel or the other to either change in volume or cut out altogether, and that tells me that the relay contacts are getting flaky. So out comes the speaker relay. Well, just about done fixing that problem. What you're looking at there is the new relay installed in the original Pioneer relay case. And the new relay is actually an Omron. See, what was it? Yeah, you can see the part number there. And then this is the inside to the old relay. The new one's a little bit higher current. I think it's 5 amp versus the original 3 amp. Let's give it a try.
Anyway, I'll be right back with more brotherly music.
Sweet.
And This Day in Rock about a drummer named Cozy. And I can say hillbilly because...
Let's get this thing mounted back in here and get on to the next step. I don't even remember where I left off on this. Oh, I love progress. Just about finished up with this one. Running on the tuner right now. I don't have the best antenna down here in the basement. I should hook up to the outdoor antenna, but I just don't feel like getting the matching transformer out right now.
For you to win one, go to WIOG.com. 102.5 WIOG, Bay City, Saginaw, Midland, a Cumulus station. Now, back. A silver coin. What is it?
It's a 1.5 ounce silver polar bear coin. It's minted from the finest silver.
Let's try the other inputs. What a better way to test the phono stage than with a real turntable. I haven't had this one out in an awful long time. It's my old Pioneer PL516. It's got a Audio-Technica AT4412XE cartridge. And this is the table that got me back into vinyl after so many years. And I've since moved from this up to the Technics setup that I have now up in my bedroom, but this still isn't a half bad sounding table. Got all new caps and transistors in this phono preamp, and it sounds pretty sweet now. Yeah, this was definitely one of the bigger projects, but we're about done here, and it's been working great. I've been using it on and off for the past few days, and no more problems. So I hope this video wasn't too long-winded for you guys, but there sure was a lot of work to do. And in fact, I'm going to be keeping some spare parts around in case anything comes up in the future with this, but I think it'll be just fine. So I will catch you guys on the next restoration video. If you guys are wondering how many parts got replaced in this project, here's a good amount of them right here. I think I lost count once I went past 100, but at least it works now.